Great flag flap.
Never a party to ignore a publicity stunt, a few Reform MPs hitched a ride to Parliament Hill in a car painted with the Canadian flag. This 1998 version of the Great Flag Debate has House Speaker Gilbert Perron battling on two fronts. First, little Canadian flags started popping up on Reform members' desks in the House. Shortly after, Separatist MP Suzanne Tremblay complained about too many Canadian flags at the Olympics. The Bloc Québécois complained, and now Perron is about to make a ruling on the appropriateness of displaying flags in the Commons.
We feel that it's important for this ruling affirm freedom of expression, the freedom to fly the flag, the freedom to sing the anthem, and freedom of speech in the House.
The other battlefront for Perron is his own remarks to a visiting Cuban delegation, where he suggested there was little difference between Cuba's one-party system and Frank McKenna's sweep of all 58 seats in New Brunswick in 1987. Reform found his remarks outrageous. Today, in an effort to diffuse this controversy, Perron issued this statement. The Speaker regrets any confusion that his remarks might have created, as it was only his intent to highlight the differences between Canadian democracy and the Cuban one-party system. It is not very often that the Speaker finds himself in the center of controversy. Gilbert Perron's apology for his Cuban remarks has satisfied the Reform Party. Whatever he rules in the flag debate is another matter. Jim Munson, CTV News.
Parties will try to find a compromise about the use of flags in the Commons. Tory leader Jean Charest compared the flag flap to the nationalism that led to the Second World War, and that set off more outrage. Here's CTV's Dave Rinn.
Members of the House have been preoccupied with the flag.
Thank God it's Friday. The honourable member, Prince George.
Reform MPs are leading the fight to put them on their desks as a patriotic symbol. Some have already done so in defiance of House rules that prohibit props, including flags. But today, Reform was shot down after complaining about the $160 million the government will spend to commemorate the millennium, including a plan by Heritage Minister Sheila Copps to distribute more flags.
Will she be distributing small desktop flags, and will she encourage people to place it on their desks, in an unobtrusive, wouldn't hurt anybody? Will she be doing that?
Mr. Speaker, this is remarkable. The Reform Party is now against the display of the Canadian flag.
The flap over the flag even followed the Prime Minister to his riding in Quebec, but he wasn't about to take sides.
My view is that let the House decide. The rule of the House are decided by the Speaker, not by the Prime Minister.
Tory leader Jean Charest has warned against what he calls excessive nationalism, reminding reformers it led to the worst excesses of World War II. The comparison didn't sit well with many Liberals.
I don't want to draw comparisons that will further inflame the situation. What I'm trying to do is find a consensus amongst the political parties to put this behind us.
The debate over the flag has turned patriotism into a partisan political issue, much to the delight of Reform MPs. The House leaders of all 5 major parties will now stay in touch over the weekend, hoping to find a way out of what one MP described as this patriotic minefield. Dave Rinn, CTV News, Ottawa.
What do you think of the flag flap on Parliament Hill?
It's all politics. The flag should be there.
My family fought for the flag, my brothers, my husband, my father, my grandfather, and I'm for Canada. And I really feel that what's happening to us is that we stand for nothing and we fall for everything. And we can't do that.
I think it's much to do over nothing, really.
I think Quebec's being a bit over powerful. They all want their own country and they want everything theirs, but what is the point? Why can't they just stay with Canada and still keep their own culture?
Should the MPs be allowed to wave the Canadian flag in the House of Commons?
I think they should be able to.
It's gotten carried way out of hand to the point of really kind of silliness.
I think maybe the media should back off and leave it alone and it'll die.
John Charest will likely announce his decision.
This week's Saturday Report commentary comes to us from Winnipeg, where Dean Jenkinson is getting mighty sick of the flag flap. He says it's time for Canada's politicians to grow up and leave the maple leaf alone.
Are you like me, folks? Does nothing fill your heart with more national pride than the sight of 7 middle-aged right-wing politicians in suits and ties tooling around in a flagmobile like a bunch of frat boys? You know, usually you have to go to the circus to see that many clowns in one car. And don't get me wrong, you know, I could care less if they want to make fools of themselves, but I do care why. Because unfortunately, the dynamic that I see happening in the House of Commons nowadays between the Bloc and the other parties is like that of an old married couple trapped in a bad relationship, and their differences and their resentment just so entrenched and well-worn, they don't even bother discussing the root of their problems anymore. No, they just spend all their energy trying to drive each other crazy. You know what I mean? So when Bloc MP Suzanne Tremblay complains about too many flags at the Olympics, well, that's just nitpicky nagging. And then when the other members stand and sing the national anthem, well, that's the equivalent of squeezing the toothpaste in the middle and deliberately leaving the cap off. You know, they love their country, I'm sure, but they're doing it because it drives the Bloc nuts. And it seems to me when you use your flag to inflame or to provoke, you're not honoring your country, you're disgracing it. You know, the maple leaf's not something that you stick in somebody's face to get their goat or to push their buttons. It's not a matador's red cape that you hold up to make a bull charge. Now, I think the Speaker was utterly right to denounce such behavior. And I say shame on all you MPs for using patriotism as an excuse for incivility. I say double shame on you for now being more concerned with protecting a mere symbol rather than the ideals it represents. And okay, I know the Bloc started it, and I know not all of MP Suzanne Tremblay's neurons were firing when she complained about the flags, but be the bigger person, you know? Otherwise, we're reduced to the level of 2 bickering siblings in the backseat of a car with the Bloc going, "Dad, he's waving his flags at me," and the other MPs, "What, can't I be a little bit patriotic?" I say the bottom line is you learn to play nice with your flags, or there'll be no flags for anyone. In Winnipeg, I'm Dean Jenkinson.
That's Saturday Report on this March 14th. For CBC News, I'm Lawrence Saxberg.
The Speaker won't change the rules to allow those tiny desktop flags, and the Reform Party is ready to end the nasty spat after one last gabfest tomorrow.
After 19 days of controversy, Commons Speaker Gib Perrin finally ruled on what's become known as the flag flap.
The events during question period on February 26th were clearly out of order.
The events happened when Liberal and Reform MPs waved small Canadian flags and sang "O Canada" when Separatist MP Suzanne Tremblay rose to ask a question in the Commons. Today, Perrin said it is his sworn duty as Speaker to uphold free speech in the Commons for all MPs, that the issue was not about the flag, the anthem, or patriotism. And in spite of the pressure, Perrin, his voice rising with emotion, said he would not unilaterally change the rules of the Commons.
I cannot and I will not arrogate such authority to myself unless and until the House decides otherwise. No displays will be allowed and current practice will be upheld.
Earlier in the day, the Reform Party refused to sign a face-saving deal with the 4 other parties, but appeared ready to soften its stand on the issue. It will put a motion before the House tomorrow.
And it will be regarding the privileges of members to keep a desk flag on their desk if they so choose, and they'll just put it to the House for a vote.
Haven't we had enough of jalopies with flags painted on them, to MPs throwing flags in the air?
Some MPs have found a new way to show their patriotism: flag ties. The opposition motion to allow small desk flags will likely be voted down. Reform says it will live with whatever decision is made by the Commons. Bill Rogers, CJOH News.
Speaker of the House of Commons has finally ruled on the flag flap. Gilbert Perrin says no flags in the House of Commons, no props as he called them, to disrupt Parliament. But as Julie Van Dusen tells us, the flap isn't over yet.
Prime Minister During today's question period, you could spot the odd Canadian flag, a clear violation of the rules. In the House of Commons, those little desk flags are considered props. The Reform Party doesn't see it that way and says the only way to solve the issue is to let all MPs have a say.
We'll introduce a motion in the House during our Supply Day motion, and it will be regarding the privileges of members to keep a desk flag on their desk if they so choose, and then we'll just put it to the House for a vote.
Other parties say reform is using the flag as a political weapon, and it's got to stop.
It's an attempt to crank up the intensity of the debate on the flag again. Haven't we had enough of jalopies with flags painted on them, to MPs throwing flags in the air? What are they going to do next?
It all started last month when Bloc MP Suzanne Tremblay complained there were too many Canadian flags at the Winter Games in Nagano. Some flag-waving Liberals and Reformers shouted her down with a rendition of O Canada. Since then, the flag flap has heated up, driven by Reform MPs who say it's a question of freedom of speech. This afternoon, Speaker Gib Perrin ruled that Bloc MP Suzanne Tremblay's right to speak had been violated.
That such an incident must not be repeated.
As to the use of the flag, the Speaker said if MPs don't like the no flag rule in the Commons, it's up to them to change it.
A change, my colleagues, that no Speaker has the authority to make.
Reform leader Preston Manning says he's anxious to see the results of tomorrow's vote.
Our view is it should be perfectly permissible for Canadian Member of Parliament to display the Canadian flag.
The NDP's House leader says his party won't be pushed around by reform.
It's divisive and destructive, and should tell you something about what kind of country we'd have if the Reform Party had any more influence than they already have.
All parties but Reform wanted a parliamentary committee to study the flag issue. But Reform says a vote is the quickest way to settle the problem and will give all MPs the chance to explain their vote to their constituents. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Reception of MPs among their constituents over the flag flap. Commentary on that tonight from Tom Clark.
Thank you and good evening. The Canadian flag, even a small little one, is nothing more than a political prop that has no place on the desks of MPs in the House of Commons. That is the official ruling from the Speaker, but certainly not the last word. Mike Duffy is standing by on Parliament Hill. Duff, not the last word because the Reform Party will bring this to a vote tomorrow. Is there any chance of the decision being reversed?
None whatsoever, Tom. The other four parties have decided they will vote together against reform and against having the flag on the desk, even though backbench Liberal MPs have been walking by here shaking their heads and saying, Duff, how do we explain to Canadians that we will keep our Canadian flag out of the House of Commons because we don't want to upset the separatists?
Well, how does the whole system explain this to the Canadian people?
Well, Parliament's grown up over hundreds of years, all the way back to Britain, with certain kind of rules, and that you don't change the rules easily. And basically, the reform caught everybody off guard. The thing took on a life of its own, and the last thing they want to do is give Preston Manning any kind of a boost with the Canadian population. I think the answer is to convince everybody, including the Bloc, to vote in favor of it, so you take the controversy away. But apparently they're not prepared to do that, so we're left with this rather sticky situation. But in keeping with the kind of neutrality of the day ordered by the Speaker...
Good for you. No Canadian flags on you today, Duff.
No Canadian flags today. In fact, I thought we'd probably be talking tonight about the Globe and Mail headline. What was it they said today? Willie puts Clinton in peril. But instead we're back at the flag, so what can I do? Anyway, I'm standing on guard with the old stars here, and I got the stripes down my back, so...
All right. Well, I don't think we've heard the last of this stuff, either the story we're talking about or the one that you're talking about. But we will revisit all of this again tomorrow. Thanks very much for being here.
Those of us who are pure of heart have nothing to fear. Bless you, my son. See you tomorrow.
All right. PBS commentator Mike Duffy on Parliament Hill.
To get into the movie. And this is something from one of my favorite Canadian comics. He expresses his humor sometimes with T-shirts, and this is his latest. What
does it say?
It says, warning may be offensive to some viewers. And there's a picture of the Canadian flag.
That's great.
Okay.